So glad to be here. Yeah. Seriously. And hi, Zoom. All right, good afternoon. So good to see you. Mostly familiar faces, a few new. So my name's Katie. Can we go around and you share your names? Jamie? Lola?
Or
What was that?
Laura.
Or Laura.
I think I'm Laura in my body, but.
And Lola. I know you as Lola.
Yeah.
And you're
Anna.
Anna?
Michelle.
And Michelle.
Lydia.
Ambika?
Catherine.
Lydia. Nice to meet you all. And thank you, Kayla, for hosting this training and welcoming me. So like I said, mostly familiar faces, but I've taught here at Pleasure Point Yoga for about 10 years. And in that time, let's see, similar path to Kayla, went back to grad school in 2015 and studied holistic integrative psychology at the California Institute of Integral Studies. And so, I mean, it's a long journey, right, of how we all get to where we're at, but just a little context. I studied Ayurveda before I studied yoga. So I studied at Mount Madonna Institute back in maybe 2010 or 2011, became an Ayurvedic diet and lifestyle counselor, and then went to India when I was 25, and that's where I did my yoga teacher training. And then when I came back and started teaching, that's when I wanted to kind of dive in deeper in the psychology realm, and was initially drawn to CIS because of their roots in Eastern psychology with Sri Aurobindo. And since that time, worked at a high school with teens, went into a counseling center, and now more in private practice. And so these are just two topics that I love, yoga and psychology. So there's so much that we could cover, and really, 2 hours at first is like, oh, that's a lot of time. But I would really love this to be a discussion. So as we explore these concepts, if there's certain things like, oh, I want to go deeper into that, or if you have questions, because I don't know what you all have covered so far in this training. So if certain things I don't want to repeat, it's always good to have it ingrained and hear it again. But I would really love to hear from you if there's certain things like, oh, I want to go deeper into that. So we're all students of yoga here, and I think we can all learn from just as much from each other through this process. So that's my intention, discussion, collaboration, and yeah, so just a little bit of like where we'll go, because these are such big concepts. Yoga and psychology, seeing how these two, there's really yoga psychology of what this Yoga Sutras kind of presents as this way to look at our inner world, but then there's also yoga and psychology. And I can also email you guys some handouts and resources at the end too if you have questions. But so we'll kind of start with that yogic lens, and then we'll go a little bit into like Western psychology and how that's shifted and changed, and really how these two technologies or systems of study are similar but also different, and how we can use them and how we see them play out in the yoga studio, in the room. And so we'll end with more like relational dynamics between student and teacher, and boundaries and things like that. How does that sound? Good? Okay, just curious, where are you remind me of the context of where you're at in the training as far as graduation. It's coming up, I think.
2 weeks. Yeah, October 1st.
October 1st. So you have one more weekend after this?
Yeah.
Wow, so you're at the kind of tail end. It's been a long journey. How are you all doing? Your brains are just like cracking open. Yeah.
Good stuff, that's so good.
Yeah.
It all connects.
It does, and it continues to steep and work on you in so many ways, right?
And we're a red cohort, so.
So obviously, it's just incredible. So that's this. I think this is a great topic to have at this point in the journey too. So I'd like to start with a meditation. Do you want to just find a comfortable seat? And if a comfortable seat doesn't feel supportive, you're always welcome to lie down, take care of yourself in any which way that you need, and always use the restroom, grab water. You need to sit against a wall. Please do. So let's just take a moment to land and arrive, and we'll be on a bit of a journey here through what are called the koshas, right? The layers or the sheaths of our being. But as we take this seat, as we begin, just allow yourself to go inside. And checking in however you check in. I'll first have you bring your awareness to your physical body. So you might feel that outline. Feeling your bones, the minerals of your bones, your muscles, your skin, connective tissue, the blood, the breath. And that physical body is your Annamaya kosha, first sheath or layer of your being. And so if you're needing any movement here to feel that, if it's a gentle cat-cow, just circles through the hips, through the rib cage, just really your Annamaya kosha. And going another layer inward is your Pranamaya kosha, the energy body. And so you'll start to deepen that connection with your breath, prana. Feeling your inhale flowing in, filling your lungs. And your exhale flowing out, emptying completely. And to feel this a bit deeper, you can keep your eyes closed, but bring your hands together and just start to rub the hands together. You feel a little warmth and heat between the palms, maybe a little stronger. Keeping that connection with breath. Take a deep breath in. Full breath out. And then you'll slowly, as you begin to pause the palms, just start to separate the palms a little bit apart. And that energy between the two palms. Maybe start to widen those palms just a little bit. Expanding. When you're ready, just gently resting your hands on your knees. Feeling your energy body. And then next you're going into the Manomaya kosha. This is the mental sheath, mind stuff. So just start to notice any thoughts. And this sheath is what brings the outer to our inner. So without gripping to or pushing away, or just noticing. And this is also emotions, patterns, programming, Manomaya Kosha. And we're going another sheath deeper, Vijnamaya Kosha. So you can let your awareness now rest maybe at that space between your eyebrows. Intuition. Or for some, maybe it's more connected at the gut. The sense of the wisdom body. Knowing that we're more than this body and these thoughts. And so you might, for a visual, see yourself at a mountaintop, an expansive view. That vastness. And then going even deeper, that core, that center, is the Anandamaya Kosha. It's that soul, that bliss, Satchitananda, pure bliss consciousness, your essence. It's always there. And so wherever you let your awareness rest now, maybe it's at the heart, that core, that place deep inside. And just taking a few breaths. Enhancing our awareness of our inner world and supporting this connection between body, mind, spirit. And so whenever you're ready, you can begin to open your eyes and just notice what your eyes take in: color, shadow, light. So these are often called the Russian doll model, right, as we go from the outer to the inner. And so that's one kind of framework that the Yoga Sutras provide for us to better understand our inner world. Any questions about that or anything anyone noticed?
I haven't done the laying the hands apart after running in a while, and I forgot how palatable it is when your hands are really close. Like someone taught me one time to do that, but then start to squeeze back together. That's when I was learning about different energy.
Yeah.
And I was pretty cynical, like, and it's like there's something there, and there is.
Yeah.
But tuning into that really,
Like the electricity.
yeah. It's like there's a little pillow there that if you're really tuned in, and then you can, when you start to move away, there's a little bit of resistance, and then when you come back in, there's resistance. It's really,
It's pretty cool. So those are the koshas, the layers of our being. And just to elaborate on that, right? So chitta is the mind stuff. Vritti is being those thought waves. And so we often hear in yoga, right? Chitta, vritti, nirodha. That yoga is the cessation of thought waves in the mind. And so clearly Patanjali, or whoever the many folks that were creating the Yoga Sutras. There's many theories on that, right? This was much more than just asana, which you all have probably been exploring. Like asana is one of the 8 limbs. And so really this presentation of this 8-fold path, so much of it was to help us overcome the kleshas, different than koshas, right? Kleshas being the afflictions of the mind. So even way back when, it was like, oh, there's all these afflictions in the mind, and now we have these technologies, these tools, these practices to help us overcome that. So it's not just a physical practice, and it's not just for the mind. Yoga clearly was onto something way, way, way back when that just now modern psychology is catching up with, right? Because we often see in Western psychology, at least more like old school, such a heavy emphasis on just the mind, just the brain, and kind of forgetting about the body. Whereas yoga was this holistic technology and approach. And so often that's the case, right? That like modern science starts to prove the ancient wisdom. And all of a sudden like, wow, now we have evidence-based practices that just confirm that. And like, oh, we had an embodied experience of that already. But it's still pretty cool to see, right? So yeah, chitta being the mind stuff, vrittis being the processes, so cessation of thought waves. While that's what yoga has said, I don't know anyone who's been able to stop those fluctuations, right? It's more of that awareness of and that space. There's a great quote by Viktor Frankl that's shared a lot. I first heard it when I was up at Spirit Rock a long, long time ago. But are you anyone familiar with Viktor Frankl? The Holocaust, Man's Search for Meaning. I would probably butcher it, so I feel like I should look it up, but I would share it a lot in classes because it just seemed to distill so much of what we're doing here. Let me just look it up. Of course, I'm trying to look up a quote. Okay, so between the stimulus, so the outer thing, and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom and power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so for me, that's so much of yoga, right? We're creating this space for more, and psychology and therapy. We're creating space for more awareness and then ultimately more choice, right? Now, when we don't feel like we have that choice, where things feel maybe more habitual or compulsive, anyone have those experiences where you feel like I just am doing these things and I can't stop, and the hooks. And so in yoga philosophy, when those vrittis get so entrenched and ingrained, they become samskaras. You familiar with samskaras? You guys talked about that in here yet? Yeah. So those samskaras being the habitual patterning, and those can live in our bodies, right? And so I love the example back in grad school, someone was sharing, a professor, that those early coping strategies or defenses, it's kind of like our jetpack when we're really young, right? Whether it's how we put on this jetpack, whether it's this is how we get love, how we get approval, or how we just survive. And then we're later in life, we're still wearing that jetpack, right? Those defenses, those things that, yes, helped us at one point, but maybe they're actually creating more challenges when we're 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 than when we were 5 and 10. So it's like, how can we bring that loving awareness to that thing that really supported us? And now maybe I can begin to wear a jetpack just on one shoulder. I can set it at the door, and again, coming back to then there's just more choice and less just in our habitual samskara pattern. And so for me, that shift of versus just like, let's let go of the samskara or cut it away, like starting with that loving awareness and relating it to in that way with even some appreciation, really, for me, is a radical shift in having less of a battle and war with ourselves that we're just needing to let go, cut off. This is bad, right? So you've touched on samskaras, right? And another great quote from Carl Jung, so more depth psychology and archetype work, is that, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will control your life and you'll call it fate. And that's another thing that we're doing here in yoga, right? We're making the unconscious conscious, bringing just more awareness, with more awareness, more choice. So another framework that the yoga, have you all covered the chakras? So I don't need to go into like what each chakra is and all those energy centers, but where it gets really interesting, there's a great Anodea Judith. I don't know if that was in your recommendations at all.
That's the author that we were talking about.
Oh, really?
I love when that stuff happens.
What were you talking about?
The Wheels of Life.
Wheels of Life, yeah.
And that's like my super most favorite chakra book, and I just found out last night that she also wrote this book.
The Chakra Yoga.
Yeah.
Yeah, she has a great one that's called East Meets West, and it's more related to psychology and development, and really how you can use the chakras as a diagnostic tool, which is fascinating.
I saw that and like the recommend people who bought this also bought. I'm like, I'm already buying 3. I
Yeah.
cannot.
You're like, I already have a pile of books next to my bed that I'm getting through.
But I saw that and it looked really yummy.
It is, because it really helps to look at different symptoms, right? So you can say like, where is there a deficiency or excess at a particular chakra? How can that help us to better understand students, clients, patients, ourselves, really? So yeah, you have your 7 centers. That's another, like, really just bridging mind and body, formula for wholeness. Both of these, right? Yoga psychology being that integration, right, of our systems. And really to then identify those different defenses and samskaras and where they are lodged in the body, right? And it also, it lines up pretty interesting in an interesting way with Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In that like 7 layer. Are we familiar with the Maslow's hierarchy, with being like your basic needs at the foundation, shelter, food, shelter and food, and then at the top being that like self-actualization, right? And so that premise is that you need these kind of foundational needs met before you can get to that space. And there's other criticisms or theories against that as well. So right, it's all to take it with a grain of salt, at least how I do and relate with it. But like, okay, we have the chakra system, we have this other Maslow's hierarchy of needs. How are we better understanding ourselves and our students when they're showing up to these spaces, right? So we could go deeper into the koshas, we could go deeper into the chakras, but bringing it to Western psychology, right? When I was saying that there was that, obviously this heavy focus on the mind and brain, and kind of forgetting that there's this physical body, where now thankfully so much more research is confirming how much trauma and emotions live in our physical bodies. And I believe that that's really why yoga is so powerful. We hear a lot about, right, you're in pigeon pose and you just start crying and you're like, I don't know why, like what's going on? Like I'm having this release. Something is happening, right? Massage therapists know, Rolfers know that like when you get in there with a physical body, there are things that can be unlocked and released in a big, powerful way. So it's not that it's one or the other, but it is both. There is this intimate connection. It gets more nuanced too, because sometimes, yes, it's mind body, they're interconnected, but sometimes what's happening up here can be very different what's happening down here. And I don't know, did you do a weekend on hands-on assist at all, or touch on that topic? Yeah. So there's a lot of different thoughts and opinions. I've studied with a teacher where it was lots of hands-on assist and adjustments in a very confident, clear way. And with more trauma-informed yoga, there's also a lot to be aware of too, because you can come, right, the difference between intention and impact. I could come in with pure loving intention, like put my hands on someone's hips in a child's pose or in a down dog, and the impact for them could, while I am coming in with one of bringing ease, right? There's different with hands-on assist, right? Am I trying to just help someone feel good, or am I trying to actually change and correct? I'm helping someone go deeper in a pose, but really, what is your intention on touching another body? If you're not clear in that, they're gonna feel that. And that's happened to me for sure. There has been a time where like my feet weren't rooted, I kind of just did a thing, and it was like, ooh, that did not feel good for that person. If I'm not like feet rooted, present with an intention, why I'm touching this person's body, at least in my experience, that's gonna be very felt. So with yoga, intention and impact, based on what someone has gone through in their life, that might not be a supportive or easeful experience for them. It could bring up a lot. Just like Shavasana might not be a relaxing thing for everybody. And where we assume like, oh, this is so easeful. And for some people, it could be like tons of anxiety comes up, or you walk into this room and there's just so, we never know what someone's experiencing, right? And they're bringing all of that in here. That's not necessarily just for my experience, if we can just be open to their response and not take it personally, doesn't mean we can never do the thing. But if they're like, ooh, that's no hands-on, okay, that's information for me of that person. I don't know if it means we can never do hands-on assist or things like this. But that's a whole other conversation too. And many trainings that focus just on that. So when Western psychology, more with Freud, started to, one of his students, Reich, was like, no, we need to address in the body, because there is this body armor and there is so much that's held and stuck here. So we've been seeing this increase now with so many somatic therapies, sensory motor, somatic experiencing, that really use that the body as the vehicle, which is really what we're doing here in yoga too. And interesting enough, the word psychology, even though it's had this heavy emphasis on the mind, like what's going on in here, psyche is a Greek word that means life, breath, or soul. So psychology is actually study or movement of the soul. So there's so much deeper, so much deeper than what we really just, when we see in the DSM, right? The DSM being that diagnostic statistic manual where we're just pathologizing. It can be useful at times, but much more of a holistic approach here in this space. So I know you guys have covered a bit of those things. Were there any like residual questions on koshas, kleshas, some scars?
Just while we were doing this one, hands, rubbing the hands together and feeling the energy, I was thinking about how that, would translate into a class that you could, kind of start the class off and connecting people immediately to that kosha. And for people that new, people new to yoga, like that being such an awakening,
Big time.
So kind of probably get them excited about, keep coming back and trying more.
Definitely having them have that like tangible experience of the energy body. And I don't know about you all, but I know for the physical practice was my gateway. It's a gateway drug as an athlete, right?
Yeah.
And so everyone's going to be at different points of where they're at and what they're wanting. Some people are like, yeah, I have tight hips, I have tight hamstrings. That's why they're here. That's great. Maybe at some point on the journey, yeah, they're like, oh, there's other energy things happening, and oh, I start to noticing my thoughts more, and there's that deepening. I was totally that. I think Kayla and I were young at Bikram hot yoga when we were like 15 and 16 in Santa Cruz, and for myself as an athlete, like, oh, I feel this is amazing, I feel so great. And then slowly like, oh, there's something deeper happening here. It's much more transformative, and you start to feel that, right? Yeah, that would be cool to offer. I know there's many different ways we can cultivate that with different pranayam. We didn't go into that, but also with the pranamaya kosha, and I think this training you focused on some breath work as well. So then you're really in that pranamaya kosha and like feeling that thread between all of them, right? Yeah, beautiful. Have you all been taught each other or been teaching classes or little bits? Yeah, how's that feeling?
Really good.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's okay.
Yeah.
Everything goes at first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Cool. So moving to the soul. So different kind of modern psychologies or in different therapies, right? We have humanistic psychology where there is this heavy emphasis on self-actualization, and in yoga as well, right? So we have the self-inquiry through yoga and psychology, bringing awareness, and this loosely a goal of self-actualization. And so I'm curious what your experiences have been. I mean, we're familiar with the book, The Body Keeps the Score, right? Yeah. So highly recommend The Body Keeps the Score. I had a stack of books to bring and I left them. So the Anodea Judith was one, East Meets West with the chakras. That's a chakra system in psychology. The Body Keeps the Score is the second. There's some criticisms of it now, but as many things. So, and that has incredible anecdotal just about how people's trauma being lodged in the body and different somatic therapies being supportive of that. So highly recommend that one. Has anyone who's read it have any takes on that? Or any little nuggets? It's incredible. Highly, highly recommend it. What have your experiences been with yoga as this, and maybe for you as the gateway was the physical practice, but about more in your emotional and mental bodies or emotions coming up in a practice? Has that happened to anyone? Have there been tears? Has there been anger? Has there been waves of emotion in a yoga class? What's that been like?
My favorite example is just taking it was like an online Aloe Glow one with my friend, and I think it was Elena Brower, and there was like, each pose was like 3 expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction, expansion, contraction. By the end, I was like beside myself, like sobbing, like didn't know exactly what it was that like clearly needed to be released, but I was like,
Yeah.
I was practicing with my 2 best friends, so I was just like, oh me.
Yeah.
So it was a great experience, and thank God I was just with my 2 besties.
Yeah.
But I didn't know that was gonna happen.
Yeah.
When I got on my mat, I was like, sure, let's do it. Let's do an online class.
And then all of a sudden, through expansion and contraction, there's this well of emotion that's coming up to the surface.
Yeah, so that was like a wow moment in my journey.
Yeah, big time. Especially when our minds are good at compartmentalizing or suppressing, the disavowing, right, of what's actually there, and then we drop into a somatic practice and it gets to well up to the surface and have that release. And sometimes you're like, I don't even know why I'm having this or what's going on. We need to know why? I don't know. But has anybody else had?
I have. I remember it was one of room, but one was a weird class. And also I was like right over you and Lydia. I remember I was just like, in the posture, just like tears just coming out. And I think it's been like through hard times in my life and going through a lot of change, and it just like is a place to feel safe, and you have the emotions just come up in some of these, especially ones I think like again like where you hold them longer and stuff, because I would just
Sink into
yeah,
that
it feels
space.
good. You know, it's not like I'm thinking, gosh, here I am, like falling my eyes up. But it's like such a good release. It feels so good and moving when you're time.
Yeah.
It's like it's healing.
Because we don't always have spaces for that.
Right.
Yes, maybe you have a therapist, but to be in a space that's held, like you said, that feels safe. You're with other people, but you don't necessarily feel pressure to be speaking with them,
Right.
but kind of held in
Good
that.
energy, you know.
Yeah.
It's very accepting.
Yeah. Accepting, show up just as you are. You're welcome.
Your class is my gateway also for that.
Yeah, it's the cry class.
Yeah.
Essentially, it's just group therapy. It's just group therapy.
Yeah, it really, and it's calm, it's yin, it was the yin on Sunday nights, and like this, I don't know how many of those classes I saw through my first 6 months after moving up here. You know, it was like a year post-divorce and like 6 months post-train wreck, fun, bounce back relationship. And moved up here and started doing the yin yoga, and just because I wanted to move my body. And yeah, when it started coming out, I was like, oh, okay, so this is a thing. And same thing, like I really, really struggle with showing emotion and crying in front of other people, and I didn't even fight it. Like part of it is like, you know, I remember pigeon pose and child's pose. So like you're not even really, you're just kind of,
Yeah.
but I didn't hold on to at all that first blush of like embarrassment or shame or like, oh my God, like that just washed right away really quickly. And I just let it out. The only thing was I was trying not to make a lot of noise. But it just came, and it was, you know, super cathartic. And that's when I started to realize like, oh, there's a lot in the body too, you know, not just in the and hips for sure.
Yeah. Really connected with that fight or flight.
Yeah,
Definitely.
so then all of a sudden I was in yoga teacher.
It escalates.
It does.
And then
it does,
boom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I haven't experienced
I was working at this job for like 3.5 years and just like, and I'm a mom, I have a 9 and a 13-year-old, and so it was definitely like an autopilot kind of feel of like routine and getting everything done, the meals, the school, the work, all of it. And in one class one day, one of the teachers said, you know, give yourself the love that you're giving to everybody else. And like tears just started to pour. And at another point in class 2, it was like just the slow down, and just like feeling my heartbeat, feeling my breath. Life is so beautiful, and I feel like I've just been kind of missing it, or like rushing through it, and so just like being present and like the presence. And that was why I did this course too, was I came in one day, it was Kayla's class, and just feeling like I need more of this in my life. Like this is the richness that I want to seek and embody and teach. And I didn't know I wanted to teach at first. It was just like, I just need more of this feeling. Yeah.
And here you are.
Yeah.
And when you say this feeling, I know you said presence. Was there anything else to the this feeling?
Yeah, this feeling of just of being aware and present and conscious, loving, you know.
Yeah, when I hear you say the word presence too, right? It's presence for the full human experience, right? Because we can't turn the dials down on some emotions and then only turn the dials up on others, right? And so it really is that capacity to be there with that totality with presence. And, you know, in the research, more science too, right, of our regulated nervous system, more in a parasympathetic state, where that cortisol, where that stress response, the amygdala, our fear, where those things begin to kind of like soothe and relax a bit, that we can drop into more of a healing space and feel something like our breath and our heart, where you're taking care of 2 kids and working and just on Instagram or whatever the thing might be that's hooking you to actually drop in to feel what's there. One of my favorites, have you all come across in this space or on your own, I reference her a lot, Tara Brach in classes, because her guided meditations are really similar to the framework and model that I use in my therapy work, which I'll share later, but highly recommend her podcast, where she has guided meditations, but even the Dharma talks. And so she has that, the rain meditation. Have you all come across that here in the space with Kayla? Yeah, so recognize, allow, investigate, and with nurturing presence. Because, and later in my notes is the concept, again, I am asking lots of questions since you've been doing this all, for 6 months? And I'm just coming in for like 2 hours. I'm like, where are we at? But I know that I review basics of Ayurveda, you know, for last 15 years, and I'm still like, it's what it can sink in on a different layer, right? So even if we're revisiting something, maybe it taps into something in a new way. But I wrote down spiritual bypassing, which is something that, right, kind of bypassing the heart. That would be a lot of like love and light. And it's nuanced, right? Because for some people, has everything, I'll probably say that a lot too, but having positive affirmations and listening to things that feel, different mantras to like harness attention can be powerful, right? Where are we placing our attention? And that can be a slippery slope, what they are calling kind of toxic positivity or spiritual bypassing. If we're only focused on that, then we are bypassing, disavowing, or pushing away everything else, like maybe our true human experience, which we might be called negative. I'm sure it's written up here somewhere, like no mud, no lotus, right? It is that fullness to know one, so you have to know the other. And so that spiritual bypassing can be a bit dangerous to just in only focusing on love and light and ignoring or not giving attention to what maybe needs attention and listening inside too. And so I think Tara Brach is really effective for recognizing, allowing, and this investigating, and still bringing that nurturing presence to whatever's there. Whether that is anxiety, whether that is sadness, whether that is grief, whether that is like, oh shit, I'm so scared to be up here in front of everyone and I'm like, all these eyes looking at me. Like, can I bring nurturing presence even to that too? And for me, that again softens the inner battle and more inside. And that, the only way I was through in that way. That those are, also think about it, we need fear. It's, as Tara Brach says, that's nature's protector, right? To be scared to touch something hot, or to be out in the jungle in the wild, like these are things that actually are helping our systems. And sometimes I get in overdrive and working harder than maybe they need to. And so yoga and psychology for myself and with therapy, maybe not necessarily about getting these things to go away, but it's that we can bring the awareness and then shift our relationship with them so they're not so much of a problem. So we are more in a place of self and self-leadership and choice. Does that make sense?
Can you repeat that? Bring awareness and
Shift our relationship to those things. Because, right, if we don't want to completely get rid of fear, or again, anxiety, that nature's protector, or a grief or the sadness, but by recognizing, allowing, investigating, we can begin to shift our relationship with it, so it's less of a problem. Or like in Buddhism, they'd say the shenpa, that which like hooks us. So we start to create a little more space. You can always find the space in the breath. Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like lately I've been changing my relationship with fear, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think COVID had a big impact on me.
Yeah.
Like I work remotely, so I haven't been seeing people. Like, as much, except here. This is the only time I really see people. So like I started changing my relationship with it and challenging myself. Like I'll go out and like just look at people. And so like I just do things that like scare me, like they used to be normal, but now they're not. So like I don't know, that's been helpful. Like overcoming those fears or just facing it head on instead of being scared of fear.
Yeah, the fear
Yeah.
versus like confronting it and acknowledging it. Yes, it's
Yeah.
fear, but I can be here with it.
Yeah, being aware of it,
Yeah, I know that's COVID, especially working remote, so intense and isolating. Yeah, I'm guessing for many people that time that you're not alone in that, with a lot of fear coming up.
And it's like people are still getting out of it. I mean, that's what I feel too. It's everyone seems at ease, you know? Yeah. It seems like you say, I'm not alone. I can feel it too in a way.
Big time. And then bringing it into the yoga room, I've had many, some students who just now are coming back to in person.
Yeah.
And so for so many of us, when you're in yoga training, it's a lot about your own practice, but then you start to be like, oh, actually, I do want to teach this. And what would that look like? And what do we do in these situations with, or do we do anything when if you see somebody sobbing in the corner, or somebody comes in and there's 30 people in the room and the windows are closed and they're like, oh, I'm not used to this. Like, how do we navigate some of those things? And since we're all students, ultimately, from our own experience, we're all going to be navigating that differently, but just good questions to ask. Like, I'm curious, what do you all think? And you can base it on like what maybe is something would help you in that moment. As a teacher, if somebody is having an emotional experience, how might you navigate that? Or if somebody came in the room and they seem overwhelmed coming back from COVID, how might you want to relate with that person, those people?
I think if somebody's crying, I always like it when if I'm crying or I see somebody else crying, that somebody gives them a box of Kleenex. Because it just allows them, it just is a acknowledgement and like a permission to go ahead and have feelings. Yeah. And you don't have to like do really much else because it's awkward, especially if you don't know them, you know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, just kind of setting some tissues there, subtle. Yeah, I think it's welcome. Permission.
I think it's so interesting to me because just as, like, everybody who comes into our classes is gonna be different. And what I loved about having my little sobs during your classes, that nothing changed, like nothing. But it totally makes sense that some people would love to have that box of Kleenex. I was up in the front, if I had had any attention brought to me at all, I would have just been mortified. Because of my own struggle with emotion, not because of anything wrong with bringing, like, it's beautiful, lovely, same thing.
That's intention and impact. It's so
Right?
great.
Like, my intention is so loving and nurturing, and I'm just like, oh my God, don't let anyone look at me. So it's just, I feel like knowing everyone in here, we all have that sense of reading that. Like, I feel like everyone in here is really good about reading, like, you know, maybe just looking over at the person who's sobbing to see if there's any eye contact or if they're just fully in. And if they're just fully in, like, cool, you know, like, because prior to my own experience with that, I would have been a Kleenex bringer, right? I would have. So it's just interesting to me that we just get every kind of different human in here, and we can only do our best, you know, that's it.
Yeah.
Well, I'm probably not gonna nail it every time, just gonna go out on a limb and say that.
And that's okay.
Yeah, totally. That's when we get to be patient and compassionate with ourselves.
And then we're kind of to jump forward, because I'm curious, like, the thoughts that you all would have on that, but also the stories that we're having our own experience as a teacher up here as well. So, you know, someone, say, leaves your yoga class 30 minutes in. I don't know about you, but my mind, there have been moments, oh my God, they hate that class. It's the worst class I've ever taken. They hate me. They're never coming back. Totally what I'm thinking, right? Part of me is thinking that. They could have stomach issues. They could, their kid they have to get to all of a sudden. They forgot they left the oven on, right? So our minds are making these stories. And so just as we're inviting our students to recognize, allow, and investigate with nurturing presence, but simultaneously, can we be having that experience up here, right? And so that's a lot to be tracking. But I think when we're in that space, we have more availability. So it might be like, oh, I noticed, ooh, that stung a little bit. They left. Ooh, they don't like me. And I notice that my mind is going to, that's one of the vritis, or that's one of the samskaras, and maybe it touches into something deeper, my need for validation, or wanting that approval, wanting to be liked. It's a really vulnerable thing to put yourself up in a group in front of people, right? And to share your art, your craft, or you know, something that means so much to you. And so things will come up, right? And that's okay too. That doesn't mean that we have to stop. And I think also coming to that, we're not for everybody. But it also, that person didn't like the class, that is okay too, right?
I was just gonna say, in general, just on the like creating a safe environment, checking in with the class kind of thing, like especially like a year ago, we would do the sound baths and always keep this window wide open, like no matter what, and then it's sweaty flow right, so I open the back door all the way, open that door, like burn the Palo Santo to get a different scent in, but then I would probably go around, I'd say like a minute before class would start, I'd say like, hey, how's everyone doing temperature wise? Remember, you can grab an extra blanket if you're cold. Is everyone okay with the window open to just get some more fresh air in? Know that there will be like outside noises, and that's just part of it. And when I hand out eye pillows, I hand them out with a tissue and say tissue and keeps it clean. Some people remember to put the tissue in between their face and the eye pillow, but then I sneakily just want everyone to have a tissue. So if they need it, because sound baths are like totally a place to cry. The Crystal Heart will make you cry potentially, and then singing will make people cry. So I'm just like, tissues are right up front, like anyone else need anything, eye pillow, tissues, extra blanket, you can cry into a blanket, it still works. And just kind of making it a general thing instead of like focusing in on like trying to take care of each person. Just like a general like, hey, honor your bodies, do any self-care you need to tissues are right up here, everyone got their eye pillows, window open, close, and like close it if it gets cold, but just kind of like reading the room.
Yeah.
And that's my sneaky way of getting everyone a tissue before they cry.
I love that.
I just anticipate that, like, it happens.
Tissue in between to keep it clean, and if you start sobbing, there you go, you're prepared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anything else on just a safe, welcoming space or when emotions are rising?
The person coming in who was afraid because of COVID,
Yeah,
what do you do then?
that's a great question. Actually, we've seen it a little bit recently, and it can be a slippery slope, right? If you want to get students' opinions when there's a full class, because they'll be like, some want the music higher, might be 50-50, some want it lower, then the temperature, some want it colder, some want it hotter. If you have, even with 10, 20, 30, 40 people in a room, there's gonna be a lot of different opinions, and they're their own person with all their own history, all their own parts, all their own hormonal shifts going on, right? Or post-COVID. And, there was a student where, yeah, it felt really stuffy for them. It was a full yin class. And, I would have loved to hear like, oh, the door could have been opened up beforehand. And so when they approached me at the end of class, and I've known almost the 10 years I've taken my class for a long time, but they hadn't really through COVID. And now I happen to know that they've struggled with some health issues. And so in the stuffy space and a lot that's been coming up for them, but I really, when they kind of came at me with that, like it was really stuffy in here, I almost had to leave. I initially had a part that felt like, oh my God, I feel so bad. And then ultimately just really trying to validate her experience. And since then, I've been like really checking in a little bit more about the stuffiness or full rooms and let me know if we need a door open. So I do want that to be open, and I also have to recognize that I'm not gonna be able to please everybody when they come in with their stuff. And so there also is personal responsibility and that agency that if that particular class at that particular time and that particular size I can only do so much if that's not a good fit for them. Maybe have to recommend some other classes that, right? So we've tried to adapt with having our fans and air purifiers, but I think really just validating someone's experience goes a really long way. Listening, validating, like if they're willing to tell you a little bit more about what that's like, rather than me just like defending, right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, well, da-da-da, it's like, oh yeah, I can say thank you for telling me.
Yeah. And if they're kind of coming in the door and realizing the class is very full and not really seeing a spot where they can set up, maybe because they might be afraid of COVID, just let them go? Or do you?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think I like to just try to check in with them too. Like, hey, we can totally make a space for you, but also want to honor if it feels like too much, like it's also okay to leave. Yeah, so both are okay, right? Like there's no pressure to stay, and if you want to stay, you're more than welcome. We can make this work, right? And I've also told some people that are struggling with anxiety or other things going on, if they need to leave a class early, if they need to go to the restroom, if they need to step outside. I also take up, some teachers are like, are much more like disciplined and like doors shut if you come late. I tend to be a little bit more, please take care of yourself in the way that you need. And I'm not offended by that or if that's a distraction, but everyone gets to decide what works for them. Right? Any more thoughts about that? What you might do if somebody came in that seemed a little anxious or COVID concerns, or just how to adapt?
You say like welcome them.
Yeah,
It's like friendly,
yeah,
so that they feel like they want to come in.
yeah. That's huge. It's huge. Yeah, there's one student who came in just about 10 years ago too, and her husband had just passed away, and she initially came in, and I think at that point I was teaching like an 11 a.m. Hatha class. It was a super random time, but she wanted to run away initially, like walked in and was like, oh my God, this is way too much. But just having that moment to connect with her and find out what had brought her there and to like give it a try, and she's been coming ever since, and then just feels like this is her sanctuary and a space that she can really just show up however she is. So I think having just human to human, right? Like, you're welcome here just as you are. It is a safe space. Try it out, and if it's not a fit or you need to leave, also, you know, respect and support that too. Because ultimately, yeah.
It makes me think about when we were talking about the victim triangle.
Mm.
And I think you even said, you know, oh, we'll get into this when Katie gets here, but like just giving options as opposed to rescuing, you know, trying to make it okay as opposed to that agency that you talked about of like, if you want, you can leave this door open, you can practice right by the open door if you want, or, you know, this is also, we're doing an online one, so maybe next time you can, if that feels better for you, like choices and acceptance, but not
Fixing or rescuing.
Yeah.
And also, Gabor Mate, a really famous MD, but focused in the psychology world. Is anyone familiar with Gabor Mate, Hungry Ghost? Realm of Hungry Ghosts is a book, When the Body Says No. So he takes a much more of a trauma approach when it comes to especially things like addiction and substance abuse. He's phenomenal. Listen to him on podcasts, find his books. He has some work with plant medicine as well, but his story from being in kind of Nazi Germany, Budapest, and fleeing, and then trauma, and speaking a lot about his own personal experience. One of his concepts that I love is that we have two of our fundamental human needs, and this will make sense why I'm bringing it up. Two of our fundamental human needs being attachment and authenticity, right? So when we're babies, like we are, right? As a mom, you saw, it's like your kids are really relying on you when they're little ones. So that attachment, our relationships, right? That is a fundamental human need. And so is our authenticity. But so often, especially as little ones, but it continues, we will forego authenticity to preserve attachment. Right? We will sacrifice our authenticity to preserve that attachment. Maybe we don't speak our mind, or we push things down. We try to be the funny one, or the straight A student, whatever we're trying to do, because we want to preserve that. But later in life, if we continue sacrificing that authenticity, really, what is the quality of our attachments over time? Yes, we've preserved that bond, and is that really, are we bringing our full selves to the table?
Let go of yourself. You let go of yourself.
Yeah, you kind of let go and lose yourself. And I think in the teaching realm, like what you started to say, like around the victim triangle and rescuing, if we're trying so much to preserve that attachment, if we start focusing more on what I think my students want to see, or like, I mean, yes, it's like, okay, some feedback's helpful. Students like need a window open, or, you know, the music's a little too loud. But if we're trying to put ourselves into a box to be liked or to get students to come back, but we're not being in our authentic space, like what's going to be the quality of that teaching in that room over time? The more and more, I think, if we're in our authentic space, and actually okay that if we're not for everybody, some your people will align and come, and then we'll be like, oh, that feels good. I'm aligning with the people that I need to be aligning with, because it's totally, at least it's a journey to get there. That's so like, yeah, someone might be like, oh, that's totally my jam. Others might be like, oh no, for this other thing. Yeah, that's part of it, right? Can we be okay in those spaces? So for me, that the U-turn as a teacher, it's actually even a more intense practice of studentship. Can I notice all those little hooks of, oh gosh, are they gonna come back? Or did they like that? Oh, no one said good class after that class? Oh my God. You know? And like, and then you just feel like, I'm terrible, I'm awful, I should totally stop, I should never do this again. And you're like, okay, that's a part, it's having that experience that was wanting some validation. Okay, can I bring nurturing presence to that one right there? And also maybe, yeah, just bring some compassion to myself too. Yeah. So authenticity, attachment, and any questions about that and what it's like to bring your authentic self to a teaching or to a yogic space?
I think when you're saying attachment, I've been working really a lot with detachment. In the last month or so, we've been practicing more and more detachment from just things. And it seems like with students, you can have like, you know, a healthy, it's kind of what creates a boundary, I guess, between me and another person. The boundary. And it keeps me kind of in my body. I think like when I think of attachment, I think of like my energy glomming onto somebody else, you know, and trying to, you know, hang on to that. So detaching for me, letting go of that person or thing or whatever it is, and being present with my own energy. And I think, and it also has, I guess, to do a lot with like behaviors and that sort of thing too.
Yeah, and that's one of the Yoga Sutras, right? Apatigraha, the non-attachment. It's kind of a practice. And I guess I should refine when I said attachment too. I also mean like relationship, specifically in the authenticity piece. And attachment, it's more that like our early childhood attachment to that parental figure. So that relationship. But yes, just as a sense of attaching to things or people, right? The Yoga Sutra is helping us to, what does that look like to not be attached to an outcome or to soften those grips of control. And the modality in therapy that I primarily use, internal family systems, the kind of radical is that it's getting to know, so how should I say this? So say if I'm wanting to be more assertive, instead of just doing the assertiveness training, it's actually getting to know the part of me that has a hard time being assertive. So the practice is that by getting to know, like, oh, if I have a hard time, or if I'm shy, instead of just trying to be like, I'm spoken, it's like, oh, can I get to know that part of me that is shy? And that's kind of the shift too, like, oh, I'm wanting to feel less attached. Can I get to know that part of me that's feeling really attached right now and listen to that? We won't necessarily have a ton of time to go into the whole internal family systems model, but for me, it really is so similar to yoga in this way of how we're relating with ourselves, really as a spiritual practice. So if you're ever able to come across any of Richard Schwartz, Dick Schwartz's work, he has a book called No Bad Parts. It's really fundamental and incredible. Again, it's another system and framework of how do we listen? How do we listen inside? How do we find that space, that choice, and self-leadership? So we're not just in the samskara hooks and loops and playing out all these habitual patterns or blueprints that go back to that jetpack, right? Softening the grip again and again and again and again, right? Do you need a minute to, we're about just over halfway, do you need a minute to stretch or grab water for the bathroom? Saw a nod. So next up, we can talk a little bit more about the relational dynamics in the room of student to teacher and boundaries and all that good stuff. Kayla, is there anything in particular that you were hoping for us to go deeper into today, or?
Oh my gosh, this is so wonderful.
you were saying, the student-teacher
Relationships.
relationship with boundaries and, have this framework, would it help you to look at what's in your manual, or?
I don't necessarily need to look now, but yeah, if there was anything, like I said, that hasn't been covered yet, or like that you wanted to go deeper into, just let me know.
Yeah, I think just that, and maybe like transfers and
Yeah.
transfer and stuff.
Yeah, that's up next.
Yay.
So how long has the training been? It's been about 6 months,
About 5 months, we started the last week of April.
5 months, yeah. What a journey.
Those weekends are always really a lot.
Yeah.
In a great way, but by Sunday night, I'm always
Just exhausted.
exhausted, full but exhausted.
The Manamaya Kosha so much. Taking in so much. Yeah, so when we shift into this more relational student-teacher dynamic, one of my professors shared, but I think it applies here too. I don't know if anyone else has had a thought, at least as a therapist, you're like, do I have to have my whole life figured out in order to be a therapist? Or like, especially as a yoga teacher, do I need to be able to like nail every pose? My back went out. When I was 25 in the ashram, I had a severe back injury. And so I went in thinking, I'm gonna do all these like crazy things. And then all of a sudden I'm like flat out on my back, and my practice was to like sit. And I was taking like Indian painkillers and just like, oh, like that's the experience we're having. And I'm gonna teach if I had such a gentle practice for a very long time. So it could be there's a part that like, oh, I need to be able to master these poses, or I need to like know all the sutras in order to be able to teach, or if I just was crying on the phone and now I have to go teach a class, who am I? Right? We often hear like imposter syndrome and things like this. But I love what this professor said. She was like, to be a therapist, or I'd say a yoga teacher too, you don't have to have all your shit figured out. You just need to know where you parked it so you don't drive your clients into it. Right? So same with teaching, like I just need to know my shit. If I can be tracking that, then I'm not like driving and taking people right into the big shit pile with me. So we're all humans, we're all students, right? And so I think that when we're connected to our own studentship and really remembering as a teacher, it really is that forever student work, then there's that, we're able to connect, right? Like I'm also in this process too, and I'm just like, there's my shit pile over there. Don't go over there. We got that. So yeah, tracking our stuff, and that brings us to using kind of this psychology, one of the frameworks known as psychodynamics. So the dynamics that are happening is actually very attachment based, meaning our early childhood experiences, how we attach to a primary caregiver, and how that then plays out in our later adult lives. All that you missed was we said a quote of, you don't have to have all your shit figured out, you just need to know where you parked it so you don't drive your students or clients into it. So we're just now addressing relational dynamics in the yoga room. So transference and countertransference. Has anyone come across those concepts in their own?
No, that's new.
What was that?
Page 219.
Oh, it's in there. Oh, awesome.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I've heard of it, but I don't. 218/19.
Yeah, so psychodynamics, again, there's so many different models of therapy and psychology. You know, you have these much more cognitive CBT, DBT, and then moving into dynamics being another one, object relations, attachment based, client-centered, humanistic, somatic. You have family system, Bowennian. There's so many different, just like with yoga, right? You have hatha, vinyasa, this, yin, restorative. So many different lineages under an umbrella of yoga, or different approaches under the umbrella of psychology. And transference and countertransference are concepts under psychodynamics, again, being more of this relational, attachment-based. I could go into attachment style for a long time. Read the book Attached. There's so much there about how we relate to other people based, again, on those blueprints of our early childhood experiences. When there's like a rupture in a relationship, do we want more contact? Do we need more space? One's not better than the other. This is just our systems trying to regulate themselves at the end of the day, right? And when we have more awareness of maybe how we attach or how we respond, then we also can have a better understanding of what our needs are in those types of moments. That can be a lot. But transference is, I don't know what the definition in your manual is, but it is a theoretical phenomenon characterized by the unconscious redirection of the feelings a person has about usually their parents, for example, or another close person they've attached to, onto the therapist. And if we're using that yoga room as kind of a similar environment, that could be then projected on the yoga teacher. So it usually concerns feelings from a primary relationship during in childhood. Not, it doesn't have to be. Is a projection that then gets transferred on to the therapist or yoga teacher, right? So that could be their expectations of you, how they're wanting you to hold a space. It could be you make one look and they feel like you don't like them or you didn't give them attention. They're basically projecting maybe those experiences they had from someone early in their life or someone they're close with onto you. And again, back to intention and impact. I had a student a long time ago where I went and I either was like rubbing feet or putting a blanket on. Again, my intention of nurturing. And later he was like, oh, it was bringing up. He's like deep in a therapy journey. And he's like, how I didn't receive that from the motherly person in my life. And it actually brought a lot of grief and sadness, but it wasn't in a bad way. It was just, again, in difference of intention and impact, knowing all that it can come up for someone with me rubbing feet in a blanket and putting on a blanket. Oh, it's so nurturing. And he's then trying this a little bit, less of the transference, a bit more just intention and impact. We're like, oh, I didn't receive that from my motherly figure. And yes, it feels good, but it also feels really sad, brings up that grief. But so transference, there can be a lot of expectations and things projected onto you when you're up in front of a group of people, whether people think that I'm super yin all the time. It's like, no, I teach yin because someone said you teach what you need to learn. That's not how I move through life. I mean, after teaching it for 10 years, thankfully it's helped, but there could be different things projected onto you, expectations, just who they think who you need to be, how you need to show up, tend to them, whatever that might be, those expectations. Now the countertransference, that is the teacher's reaction, so what's happening inside ourselves to different students, just to be aware of that. So someone leaves your class and you notice what comes up for you in that moment, all the different parts. Or you might get triggered by some students, right? I'm teaching a yin class and I've had people want to start doing 20 push-ups. Now in my mind, I'm like, I have a part that's like, what? Stop. Right? And so how do I navigate that too? Do I try to hey, we're in a yin class, or do I let them have their experience? I don't know if there's a right and wrong in that, but tracking whatever's bringing up in me. Right? I don't get hooked and come from that place as well. What does your book say for countertransference or the definition?
The way a student might evoke or repress feelings in you as a teacher.
deep underlying needs that have been unfulfilled, again, shadow work is so important, so our shadow does not attract situations. So it'll be seen.
Yeah, so technically like the transference being with the student projecting onto you, countertransference is kind of how then you respond to that countertransfer, to that initial transference. But I think also just in general, tracking whatever's coming up for you as a teacher, again, for your shit pile, you're kind of just like noticing, oh, this one student keeps like music lower or higher, or like has a lot of requests, and it's like, oh, I'm noticing a part that's feeling frustrated or irritated. If I can be noticing that in real time, like, oh, okay, there's this part that's happening. I'm not getting hooked in the thing with them, right? What does this one say too? And I have a note here about, if students are also projecting, say like whatever they're getting from the practice, they really attribute it to the teacher. So that could be something that feels really good, right? Someone's like, oh my gosh, like, you've changed my life. And I'm like, yeah. And that's where, right? Like they attribute it to you, and it doesn't mean we are just gonna deflect a compliment or like our role in something necessarily, but that's a really slippery slope because of this inherent power dynamic. And we see this a lot more in like gurus of yoga across the globe, where there's like big abuse of that power, whether that's sexually or just emotionally, or I could probably list off, not only BM, but so many teachers. Such a power dynamic and a vulnerability. Yes, if someone is being elevated in a position, there is massive responsibility with that, right? And so I think it's important to acknowledge, yes, we're all students on the journey together, but there is a power dynamic, and that is something to be aware of, and how the ways that it does our own kind of transference of our own ego, whether that's building us up, oh, you are the reason that I'm enlightened now, like, yeah, I'm so great. Or like, oh my gosh, I threw my back out in your class and it's all your fault, and you're like, oh, I'm terrible, I should also quit teaching. So neither one of those being what we need to hook to, right? It's yeah. Any questions about that? These are some deep concepts.
I like what you said about that, like we're all students, like somehow conveying that to the student if they compliment you in such a way that, my
Yeah.
ego just blew up.
Yeah.
You can say something like that kind of takes the energy, like the big energy out of it.
Yeah, right. There's ways to both acknowledge the power dynamic, but also ways we can kind of help reduce that hierarchy a bit too, that as we are in this together. But also, you all are spending a lot of time and energy and have a lot of knowledge, and so there is something that you're bringing to that. And there, when people are vulnerable and looking at you and you're sharing something, whether that any kind of teacher, right, there is that, especially with therapist and client too, a power dynamic and a vulnerability. And we've seen that that's been abused a lot. And so that kind of brings us to boundaries conversation. And there's, I think, a lot of different views on this. So like when I did my training, however many years ago, it was like, you're not friends with your students. Like old school was like, you're not friends with yoga students. More new school, you see that maybe that's not necessarily the case. I'm curious what you think, Kayla, on that. I also think there's more nuance there. Yeah, before I go into it, do you have any thoughts on boundaries?
Yeah, I think it is so nuanced, and one of my dearest people in my life, Amy, is like, started as a yoga teacher, and she's one of my best friends, and so it's hard. But I think it's important, and I think, right, the boundaries discussion, right, around keeping your class with like clear intentions so that, you know, it's not like, oh, it's just partying, and we're like, I don't know, that's what you want to do, like, that's fine, but, you know, I'm curious what your experience too.
Yeah, it's so nuanced because, like you're saying, to be honest, I've appreciated shifting into therapy world in the sense that it's very black and white, right? It's like, can't be friends outside of this space. I only see you for 50 minutes, clock in, done, and like, you would have to, and after you'd have to not be working together for 2 years, even a dual relationship, like technically my yoga students can't even be clients. There's something that feels very clear for me in that, but I also know there's so much potential for healing when there is more of a community model as well. And so I have a really dear friend that is a therapist and does grief work and takes more of a community model, more self-disclosure, more integration of worlds. And I think it really depends upon the student and the client as well, because there is so much healing in the relationship, whether client, student, client therapist, or student teacher. With that, bring that unconditional positive regard when you're showing up with that loving presence. Like you said, just meeting somebody's eye to eye, or you're a warm presence, whatever they're going through in life. There's so much healing in that. So this U-turn is a little less about what's best for the student, but I'm gonna invite you to like, what's best for you in this when it comes to boundaries, because I know that it can change for you too. I went through a wave, I think initially I was much more like, yeah, and then I had some pretty intense experiences in the teaching world that kind of, I contracted a little bit, but it was valuable for my discernment because I had a people pleaser part and want to give a lot of my energy and space, and then being like, okay, I think I need to kind of like, and it was during COVID as well too, and it was, I mean, I can share more, it doesn't feel like necessarily that relevant, but not to like scare anyone in that sense, but just that with, I think for boundaries for me, where it became a little dicey or just confusing, this is separate, but say if a student wants to get tea or get lunch, something like outside of the class. What was confusing for me in the beginning was, what is my role? Are they seeing me as a teacher still? They're coming for guidance, or they want to talk about yoga, or are now we shifting into friend mode and I can share more of me? And I think it is a person-to-person situation where like, am I feeling like this person is, do I feel like that there's less of that hierarchy and we're more meeting in like eye to eye, like, oh, is this feel more like friends? Doesn't mean like you're picking favorites necessarily, but there's just, you can sense and feel that. And I think having a little clarity, if there is gonna be a meetup outside, like, yeah, what is the intention of that? What are our roles here? Am I still holding teacher? Because for me at times, and then that was a little confusing, like, am I teacher role? Can I tell you I had a shitty day? Can I tell you about my drama? Like, or does that gonna then all of a sudden the transference is like, they're like, wait, no, like you're in this elevated teacher role. So, and like Kayla said, then also when you share these types of spaces or you go through this work, you inherently often do build these incredible relationships because there's so many like-minded, kind of open-hearted, where you're just like, yeah, this is special. And you know, and same thing even with my therapist who became my supervisor, who now feels like a mentor and a dear friend as well. So sometimes it's like, know the rules to break the rules, in a sense of to be aware of it, and then being really conscious about how you want to do that. And also for me, and also with like hugs, I'm a big hugger, I'm a touch person, but I've had a couple experiences. It's more with like when there's a difference with gender, where I could feel that there was a grasping or a wanting, and that took me a long time to be okay with not giving someone the thing. Again, authenticity and attachment, not just giving them the thing that I could tell maybe they wanted or needed, that didn't necessarily feel true in my body, right? In that moment of like, that could also be because of, like I said, some of these experiences that I had, that I was just like, okay, this is a season where I'm practicing, like, I can put my hand on my heart or shake a hand, like, and that's okay too. That's okay too. And there's some yoga teachers in town I know are extremely boundaried, right? And others where it's like people are at their birthday parties and it's all super integrated. And I don't think necessarily one is good or bad. It's just what will really allow you to feel like you can show up in that authenticity with your own safety. Yeah.
Did you ever have like people that just were abusing these boundaries? Like, I don't know, like, I don't know, for me, I'm scared if there was like a guy who was just, for example, asked me out or something like that. Like that to me is like scary. Has that ever happened? Like, I'm always wondering if there's like, it feels like someone's setting a boundary like that.
Yeah, I do think when, at least in my experience, when there's so much love in a room, whether a yoga retreat, a yoga class, sometimes that open-hearted love can be misconstrued for more like romantic or affectionate. And I have seen it not kind of like get a little carried away or yeah, like wanting more of that connection, right? Like wanting to know you more. I can't say that that will never happen. Someone will ask you out, right? It's like, what do we do with that when that happens? Yeah, I have, yeah.
It doesn't happen to you a lot, for example.
I think there's
That's weird.
I think there's a good amount of respect in the yoga space. Yeah, I had more like, I had an experience that was more stalker-like.
Yeah,
I
it's
got carried away.
too. Like weird people, you know,
Yeah.
stalking.
Yeah, not to be like that's not gonna happen, but just to recognize, yeah, the
Yeah,
importance
because
of
I know like
boundaries.
with therapists that happens too. So
Right.
if they have the legal, like you said, there's more like
A clear,
yeah.
but talk about transference, like people will have their ideas of who you are, right? And I've had like one or two that got like, whoa, over 10 years, Yeah, what do you think about that? Like, what would that bring up? Like you said, kind of like, oof, if somebody is wanting to ask you out, like how might you want to reply to that?
Like I think, yeah, like with therapy, there's like a legal, like you sign a legal contract, like that, like with the boundaries, you know, and just here it seems less like
It's more
black and
gray.
white, so,
Yeah.
like, if there was a problem or something, like, I don't know, how would you
Yeah, I think
hold someone accountable for it, or you can't really say, like, oh, you broke this rule.
or just say no, I'm not interested in teaching. But I hear it's interesting too, like when it comes to like my cancellation policy, when it was the counseling centers, it was so much easier to be like, yeah, the counseling center has a 24-hour cancellation policy. It's so different when it's like, no, I have a 24-hour cancellation policy. It's easier to be like, oh yeah, like in therapy, like, oh, this is the rule. It can feel a lot harder when it's something we have to or are choosing to say, I'm your teacher and I want to keep that dynamic in this space. And I'm not available outside this space.
Like setting a boundary,
Yeah,
a verbal boundary.
Yes,
exactly.
like thank you and no.
Yeah, thank you, but no.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I practice that even just like with the hug thing, like thank you and I have a part too, it's like, oh, then if I'm giving some hugs, I'm not giving others, like does it need to be a universal rule? Like, yeah, I don't know, I'm sorry, that's not like a clear, straightforward answer. How do you also, Kayla, any thoughts on that?
I mean, just what's coming up for me is like, as teachers, like we're people too.
Yeah.
And so naturally, like it is hard to have that situation where someone's wanted a hug and I'm a hugger too, and my body was just like, absolutely no way. There was like some past stuff with that, not like, but it was just like things I noticed that I was like, I felt uncomfortable around, and so yeah, I mean, I think it's really what's gonna serve you guys, knowing like what your boundaries are and being able to passed away or, you know, you're dealing with some grief and just knowing how to take care of yourself, you know, and as you come in this space and then for me, it's like slow down a lot in my interactions with people in this space. Can sometimes be a little airy and fighty and no, but so it's slowing down. Trusting. Is
Yeah.
the long answer? What's the other long answer?
Yeah. But yeah, that tracking of your own yeses, your own nos, your body's wisdom, and those boundaries, and
I think that's just as powerful as a legal line that you can, like, it's easier to point to it,
yeah,
but you get to own it just as much.
Right.
Like, if you're a no, you're a no.
right,
You don't have to, and it's funny, probably just because of my familiarity with predators and stuff like that, like my work too.
yeah,
But they know who to look for, you know,
Yeah.
they know, not to even say they're in here, but if they're in a yoga class, they can sense it, you know, like, who's gonna have trouble saying no to me? And that's, you know, so not to get like too morbid or creepy about it, but the more, I feel like the more you can prepave your own certainty in your no, then a little bit easier it gets. If you happen to encounter that situation, you can say, thanks, but, you know, I appreciate it, but no. And no explanation. No is a full sentence, you know, thanks, but no. But it's tricky.
yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, like, I think I'm more scared of like the soccer.
Of the what?
Of the soccer parts. Because if you had something, I mean, I've heard of therapists also having something, that's what's more scary, because you're not saying yes or no, it's just happening.
And was also able to stop it too.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. I mean, I don't know if it's
With the legal system.
Yeah, okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was such an anomaly, but yeah, I think looking at, I think what Kayla said too was big for me, because again, like I mentioned, whether it's codependency or people pleaser parts that want to tend, clearly therapist, yoga teacher, wanting to tend and help and be very externally focused, it's been such a journey to make that U-turn to know my own yeses and nos, that slowing down is huge. Like kind of that initial Viktor Frankl quote around stimulus and response. Like, can I slow down enough to actually check in for what's true for me, right? Versus just giving, my samskara is like giving that answer of what I think they need, versus like what Kayla's saying, like, yeah, like what do we need in this moment? Am I actually available for that thing? Yeah, you don't have to give your number to us to, right? Or like none of that is, and I think maybe in the yoga space, I don't know if you all have this, but in the beginning of teaching, there's like, oh, you just want people to take your class, you know, you just want them to come back. And so there's like a little hook of like, oh, I like give them the thing, maybe they'll come back, but then at the sacrifice of your own boundaries or authenticity will not be worth it.
If you get a structure, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
They won't be talking.
Yeah. And mine was mostly, it was like online, like just a little bit of the beach, but mostly online. So speaking of boundaries as well, something in therapy world we talk a lot about is scope of practice and competency. And also initially starting out with teaching, people often will look to a yoga teacher and think that you're also a medical doctor, a physical therapist, a therapist, and ask you about like their rotator cuff and then like their childhood trauma, and they're just like and they're like psoas and then the gut stuff, and you're just like, whoa, like I'm here to teach a yoga class, and maybe you do have experience with some of those things, awesome, and if you feel qualified to answer. But one of the biggest things for me too is learning how to be like, I don't know. And how humbling that is, because again, you're on this power dynamic, and like they're wanting this answer, and you said, I want to like know a lot. Yeah, yes, oh, you're doing that, it's clicking? Well, it's probably, and now maybe you have had a similar injury, and you can start with like, oh, well, in my experience, because wounded healer archetypes, so many of us end up teaching or in therapy because we've gone through some shit, whether that's physical, mental, emotional. So we do have a lot of personal, like, value in that personal experience, but really saying it with that, right? My experience when I had a lot of back pain or hip pain, this is what I found helped and didn't. But I really like to have a little like black book of referrals. I'm not a doctor. I can't tell you what's going on with your shoulder and your hip right now. If something's not feeling right, let me know. And I have a great massage therapist, a great rolfer, or a great therapist, which I highly recommend, you know, you can go see for that too. So I think there's just so much power in the I don't know, and that it's okay to not know when they're coming with lots of questions, whether about their bodies, their minds, or their hearts. Is that an easy thing to say sometimes? I don't know. Do we feel okay in
I
saying
feel
it?
like a referral makes it easier.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel like you're just like, sorry, you're screwed. But
Yeah.
you're like, that's just not my expertise and I don't want to mess you up, but
Yeah,
there's this, because you hear me.
yeah,
What if
exactly. Exactly.
anyone needs to get this out?
Yeah, he's phenomenal.
Yes.
Any other thoughts with scope of practice and competency? I don't know, we're just feeling pressure. Does anyone feel pressure to teach? Whether that's like needing to know everything or like know like what comes up with expectations of teaching, whether scope of practice or competency.
All of it.
All of it? Yeah.
I think it's just a journey. I think we've talked about it quite a bit in here, I feel like, around just being aware of that, being aware of the different pressures we're putting on ourselves to either know it all or be perfect. Like even just in Sweaty Flow today, like in my brain right now, front and foremost is like my little 15 minutes, right? And how am I gonna do it? What am I gonna do? And it all is gonna be what it's gonna be, and it's gonna be fine, and no one's gonna die, hopefully, and it's gonna be great. But that's front and center, and then taking an hour and a half Sweaty Flow that's very, very clearly been thought out, and everything's integrated, and it's 15 plus years of experience, and I caught myself more than once holding myself to that standard of like, this is how you need to do it. It's like, oh my God, like it's been 5 months, So just, I feel like just continually being aware of that and really being gracious with ourselves, and that's why I love the cohort that we have, because there doesn't feel like there's anyone in here where there's any worry about, like it's so open and loving of like, any one of us could fall down literally during our teaching and it would be super okay, totally fine.
And that's so special that you all have
Yeah.
co-created in that.
Yeah.
And when we're little kids, right, we do so much that's new that we're not good at, right? We're learning all the time. And then, in studying IFS the last, 4 or 5 years and being in this little cohort with a few other therapists, and we did a lot of work with our like inner parts where, we expect ourselves to be an expert at something right when we started. But like when you're a kid, you're like, oh, I just want to do the thing to do the thing. Like that's fun. And all of a sudden you get older and you're like, oh, I have to like be like this expert at something right away versus like, oh, I'm learning. Yeah, to bring that joy. And that it's not a performance. It's really not a performance.
And it's not an evaluation of you as a human being,
No.
or your ability or your inability or your intellect, it's not anything. It's just give it a run.
Yeah.
Do your best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
That's all we can do.
Yeah. That's really all we can do.
When I was learning to surf, I used to get really frustrated, and someone that I was surfing with, he'd look over and be like, it's not a legal brief, you can't nail it.
Yeah.
But it super called me out, like, right, it was just like, I was like, and it was true, right? Like, you're gonna fall down a lot, that ocean is more powerful than you, you're gonna get worked, and you're also gonna have euphoric moments of joy and happiness, and it's all gonna be, and you can't nail it that first time, you just aren't gonna.
No.
And if you do, it's luck, and something else is coming.
And honestly, sometimes if you fumble and stuff, it's like students are like, yeah, you're human too.
Yeah.
Like there's actually even more relatability. Like it's like, and everyone's different when it comes to their self-disclosure as a teacher. I think, and again, that's why I don't think there's one right way. For some, it's, I want to really check my stuff at the door and I'm in teacher mode. And for some, And for me, it changes. If I'm like really going through something, do I want to name that at the beginning with that vulnerability? Or if I'm exploring a concept, does that help me be more here? Right? Like, and some folks like to kind of have a little Dharma talk at the beginning. Others don't. You know, how much do you want to bring in about your own experience, what you're mulling over, what's present for you? I'll do that once in a while. I found like time I was really going through it and just kind of not going into the whole long like saga of what's going on, but just kind of naming like, oh, like really being confronted with this thing, or my bandwidth is low. Someone's coming in for yoga. 2 more minutes. That by naming that helped me actually be more present, because I didn't feel like all of a sudden I had to hide it or like appear it like that, because that was going to take so much more effort for me to like, everything's fine, and it's like, oh, like, and maybe that gives them permission too, that they can all show up in any which way, but not to necessarily like use vulnerability to sell things. I mean, just in the sense with like social media and stuff, it's just also a fine line, like what is our intention in choosing, in sharing the thing, right? Is it like, oh, so I can be more present? Am I just making it about me, right? Little notes. Yeah, questions on a student-teacher relationship? Again, I know we kind of shifted over from boundaries there of just, what are your thoughts on how you might want to hold that as far as closeness and connection in and out of studio?
For myself, like, I feel like I have open boundaries, they've come a long way, but I think because I don't feel like super solid in having boundaries, that I would want to exercise having boundaries.
Love that, yeah.
Yeah, and just have check my shit at the door.
Yeah.
I like that, and then, and have my shit parked.
Yeah.
Those two things are good to have in my mind.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that.
Something that's coming up for me is like hugs. Like hugs are a thing, and you know, and it's really interesting because sometimes I'll feel like a hug, like I'll see someone and it's like it feels like they need a hug or something, you know. Just thinking of like Afrobeats, for example, lady, and I hadn't seen her in a while, and you know, she was like, you know, I was like, oh hi, and I gave her a hug, and she was really sweaty, and I just like felt like really I don't want to do that. And so if people are like, even like going like this, like for a hug, and you don't want to do that,
Yeah.
you know, like it's kind of hard to like reject people in that moment where you're like, I don't want to hurt you, but I also don't want to like embrace you. You know, just like putting your hand to your heart. And I've done that before. It's a lot easier, I think, with men I don't very well. Just like, oh, you know, here's a pound.
Little elbow tap,
But I don't know if you have any more thoughts on like hugs. Not like, oh, I'm a hero, like I'm here to like, you know, but like when people, you can tell that people are like they put their arms out for a hug. You know?
Well, I think just, starting with like, oh, there's a part that doesn't want to hurt somebody. Like, what is that part afraid is going to happen if they're hurt? And not that like, it's bad that we're trying to, one of us cares about people, but then we're starting to be responsible for their experience too, at the sacrifice of your own, right? Do we know that they're going to get hurt? We don't necessarily know that, right? We have some idea or story, but what if actually that's a teaching moment where they get to learn more about boundaries, right? And like maybe they're having their own experience of like, oh, that's being modeled, like, oh, thank you too. So we have an idea that they're going to be hurt, but we don't necessarily know that's the case, right? But we were just maybe afraid. I don't know, again, maybe it's some conditioning, whether it's gender, whether it's our society, like, oh, I want to give that thing. Yeah, let's see, what could be some things that we do? I write like the hand, or, I mean, I feel like it's a little more normalized post-COVID, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, it can be hard to kind of feel someone like wanting the thing, and if you're kind of like, high five. Yeah. Do we think words are necessary? Like,
I think you could maybe say, like, what's in my mind thank you for the sentiment, or
Yeah.
hugging you, or something, reading it where it's like,
You might have just like said it.
yeah, well, I know, it's like, exactly, I know, it's like, I'm not hugging you right now, so, no, thanks, but yeah, I mean, it's.
I had someone kind of come over her shoulder almost for a hug, and I kind of just like, just kind of my body language, just kind of like, not giving that thing. And for other folks, if I was okay with some touch but didn't want a full embrace, and side hug.
Yeah.
That's what I do with my teen clients too, like side, like they would, you know, a little side hug. Were you saying, Michelle?
It just escaped me.
About the
Oh,
hug?
I was gonna say, like, I feel like I'm like teaching, who knows, but like, I feel like I'm someone who would, if I saw someone going for a hug, I would probably just do it, and then it wouldn't be until after the fact that I'd be like, oh, maybe that didn't feel good for me or something. But I feel like I am someone who's like, I don't know, I am like a people pleaser. I just don't want to hurt people's feelings.
Moms.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And I'm
caretakers.
teaching, hugging those kids who are sick or snotty, it's like nurturing.
Yeah, and not to like shame ourselves for that too.
Yeah,
like,
that's what I was
oh,
gonna
like,
say.
yeah, there's a part that wants to care to, to
Right.
care for this person, but you might have enough experiences, and like where I had some experiences, like, or working on boundaries where you're like, ooh, I kind of did a thing, and maybe it does take that time or two after that's information and feedback of like, maybe I do want to be a little discerning about that, and slow down enough to create a little space going into the hug, like, oh, like heart hug. Yeah.
I was gonna say, I have to kind of practice it, because I'm a huge hugger, but also a no-no to like the whatever energy I don't wanna hug. And so I've like fumbled through that, like you hug your friend that like came to your class, and then someone else is like, hey, and you're like, oh. Body language, well, nonverbal body language, taking a step back, love showers. But like sending good energy your way, but taking a step back, or step back and
Little
thank you so much
namaste.
for
That's a great
but
one.
just like taking
Yeah.
a step back and like offering them like an acknowledgement that they
Yeah.
wanted to give you a hug, but it's like non-verbally, physically they'll get it, like the body language.
That's so good.
Because you can take a
That
step
is
back and like
Yeah.
just do that, like thank you so much for coming, or like if they're really going for it, like love showers.
Love showers.
So you're
big
not like
hugs.
saying just no,
Yeah.
but you're
Yeah.
like,
Giving them something.
it's like a
Yeah.
compliment sandwich.
Yeah.
Right? It's like,
The shit sandwich, yeah.
thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
All that good energy, let it settle in on you, like thank you.
Yeah. Because for the
Yeah,
most part,
that's
they're
good.
probably gonna be super grateful you just took them on this journey, or there's something, little nugget, something was said, and there's just, oh, there is this love, there's this connection, and that doesn't mean that you owe anyone anything at the end of the day, right? And so you're like, oh, yeah, I can give a little step back, and the energetic body language, step back. And then if you end up doing a thing that you feel like, oh, that didn't really land as a full yes in my body, that's okay. It's your own practice of Svadhyaya, all of this, yoga, psychology, it's all self-study and self-inquiry. And we all have different, like you were saying, seasons of our lives and what we're going through. That's gonna impact maybe what we feel available for that day, right? We're coming down to our last couple minutes. So I know you all went through koshas, chakras, talked a little bit about the kleshas, not super in-depth, afflictions of the mind, some skaras, depth psychology and psychodynamics, transference, countertransference, kind of undoing all of our deep samskaras. We didn't go as deep into the shadow work, but essentially that which we are disavowing, pushing away, that is what is called the shadow. And right, if yoga is helping us to make the unconscious conscious, we can be more aware of those blind spots or our shit pile. So we have more, again, space and choice in how we want to show up, how we want to relate, and not just in our, and like saying all of this is hard. When these things go way, way, way back, so deeply ingrained, our habits, our samskaras, whether in the body. And so I think really having compassion for the ways that our systems work so hard to try to regulate our systems and have been doing so for so long, not to be hard on ourselves when we see those things play out, because they really did serve us at one time, little space between that stimulus and response. There's a little more choice if I want to give that hug, a little more choice how I want to sit here in this seat and show up, right? How would I want to disclose and what I want to say and where I want to come from. But I really do believe in that, that wounded healer archetype, that there's all the manuals and there's all the things, and at the end of the day, just you showing up in your humanness, connecting like eye to eye, like you'll be a forever student, but you have so much to offer right where you are from your personal experience too. I know for myself, it's easy to be in that more trainings and more study, and yes, be hungry for that, but there's no point at it's just forever, right? There's still so much to teach and share and offer human to human. Do you want to just close by laying down for a moment? Any last questions? If any come up, Kayla will have my information. Go ahead and lay down.
I have a quick question. Yeah. I was going to ask, I didn't write down, you named a lot of people and books.
Yeah, I'll send Kayla an email of names and books and concepts.
That would be awesome.
Yeah.
It's gonna be the end of it.
Yeah, so go ahead and lay down. Give yourself any support that you need. Yeah, let out a sigh, let out what you need. Returning to how we began this session together. Different layers of your being. Annamaya kosha, your physical body, bones, muscles, skin. Your pranamaya kosha, that energy body as you feel your breath. Manomaya kosha, noticing the thoughts, chitta, vritti, those waves. Resting in that place of witnessing. A layer that brings us from the outer to your inner, deeper, to the Vijnamaya kosha, at intuition. That innate wisdom. Maybe of those yeses, those nos. And going even deeper, that Anandamaya kosha, that bliss, soul Satchitananda. You might keep awareness of these different layers and these sheaths in your own asana practice or while teaching. We're multi-dimensional, many layers. And so I'll just invite you, as you let yourself steep in that inside space, just notice what's here. So we'll use that recognizing. Recognize what's here present for you. Whatever came up through this discussion. Boundaries, student-teacher relationship, or any residual from earlier in the day. And let whatever is present, let it know that it's welcome, that it can be here. That sense of allowing. And if there is a particular thing, you can investigate it or just simply say hi to it. When we investigate it somatically. So if there is that thought, feeling, a part, experience coming up, just seeing where it lives in your body right now. And then bringing that nurturing presence to whatever is there inside. As someone shared, kind of bringing the nurturing presence that maybe you would to your child, niece, a nephew, a friend. Rather than telling them to feel a different way or a certain way, you're just saying, hey, I see you, I'm here with you. I truly have never seen a part experience inside that's not trying to help in some way. So feeling that nurturing presence from your toes, the soles of your feet, to the crown of your head. Let's take a deep breath in to fill the lungs. A long breath out. One more deep breath in, fill up enough. Bless you, side out. Last one, slow inhale, drink it in. And let it go. And as you deepen that breath, you can slowly reawaken your body, fingers, toes, ankles, wrists. Maybe you stretch your arms up overhead, toes to fingertips. And hug your knees into your chest, big embrace, nurturing embrace. Embracing all that comes up with this yoga journey, lots of teaching. And as you release onto one side, a fetal position, pause, the space. Yoga, one definition being that integration of head, heart, and hands. And so as you use those hands, ground them into the earth to rise up to find any comfortable seat. So that alignment of inner and outer. And finding any gesture, if that's hand to heart, if that's hands together, whatever brings you back. Practice of returning, reconnecting, remembering. And all this wisdom, intelligence inside. To listen and to teach from this space. And when you're ready, you can open your eyes. Maybe just stretch the arms up, big stretch. And let it go. Just want to honor each of you for the courage it takes to show up to these spaces, the dedication, learn to unlearn, to get curious. So thank you for letting me be a part in a short little snippet of your journey. Thank you, Kayla. incredible cohort diving in, and I will send Kayla a list of a few of those books, resources, and names and quotes. If you have any questions about all things psychology therapy, let me know. You can reach out anytime. We can talk outside of this space. It's okay. And always down this space for hugs if anyone wants a hug. With all that said,
He teaches here on Mondays, Sunday nights. We have the beach on Wednesday.
beach on Wednesday. Yep, Sunday and Monday's yin, and then Wednesday morning at the beach. Cool. So excited for you all. Graduation so soon. Congratulations.
You guys, let's take a 10-minute break. So we'll come back at 4:12.
There's a class coming in here, or is it over there?
It's over there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. It's a big day.
What time do you guys in today?
5:30. Yeah.
See you when I come back. It says dance studio for yin.
Yeah, but,
Maybe I'll put a little note over there.
yeah, that'd be good.
So excited for you all. How's it?
Yeah.
It's a good sign. Right, that's the forever journey with it.
Yeah, right.
Thank you so much.
That was so wonderful.
Awesome, I'll send you a little handout online.
Yeah, and I'll send out your information.
Yeah, we should talk more. All the shawl, iPads, all the things.
Yeah, I'm obsessed with it.
So fun. Oh my God, so fun. Bye, Lola. Bye, everyone.
Enjoy, see you in a little bit.
I know, right?
How about some soothing Native American flute?
Love.